September 1944. Outside a rain-dark village in Lorraine, George Patton stood beneath the broken limbs of an apple orchard with binoculars pressed to his eyes. Below him, a platoon from the 5th Infantry Division was trapped in a beet field. Not hidden, not covered, just pressed flat into mud while a German machine gun worked from the loft window of a stone dairy barn 300 yards ahead. Every few seconds the gun fired again. Short bursts, measured bursts, the kind that told every man in that field the same thing. Move, and you die. Patton had maps spread across the hood of a Jeep. 2 radio operators waited behind him. A captain was already asking for mortars. Then a single American soldier stood up. No order, no signal, no one beside him. Just one corporal rising out of the mud and running straight toward the barn. The captain said, "He's broken." Patton lowered his binoculars just far enough to see the whole field. Then he raised one hand. "Hold fire." The captain turned. "Sir?" Patton did not look at him. "I said hold fire." And for the next 90 seconds, an entire command post watched one man run at a machine gun. His name was Corporal Matthew Egan, 26 years old, Wheeling, West Virginia. Before the war, he had worked in a rail yard, coupling cars, setting brakes, watching grades, learning the small, invisible rules that made heavy things move. He was not a speechmaker, not the loudest man in the platoon, not the one anyone pointed to when they talked about natural heroes. He was the man who noticed things: a loose bolt, a bent switch rod, a rail that looked level until rainwater told the truth. By the time he reached Lorraine, he had learned another kind of reading: fields, ditches, road crowns, stone walls, the little folds in the ground that meant nothing on a map and everything when someone was firing at you. That morning, his platoon had advanced across the beet field just after dawn. The rain had stopped, but the soil had not dried. Their lieutenant went down first, hit near the shoulder. A sergeant tried to pull him back and took a burst across his pack. The rest of the men dropped where they were. A few tried to return fire. It did almost nothing. The German gun was in the upper loft of the dairy barn, behind a dark square window, high enough to rake the field, low enough to see the men who tried to crawl away. Egan lay behind a rise of muddy beets no higher than his wrist. He could hear men breathing hard on both sides of him. He could hear someone praying in a voice so small it sounded like a child. Then he saw the line. Not a road, not cover. A dark, wet seam in the field. It started near an old cattle gate on the left, dipped along the side of a drainage cut, then curled toward the blind wall of the barn. From where most of the platoon lay, it looked like nothing. From Egan's angle, it looked like lower ground, maybe 2 feet, maybe 3. Not enough to protect a man standing, enough to hide a man who ran bent low and did not stop. He watched the machine gun fire again. He watched where the bullets struck. The bursts chewed up the beet tops above the seam, not inside it. That was when he understood. The field was not flat. Everyone else was fighting the gun. Egan was reading the earth under it. He looked once toward the lieutenant. No one saw him. No one gave him permission. So he pushed himself up and ran. On the orchard ridge, Patton saw the movement immediately. At first, even he could not tell whether the man was brave, terrified, or already dead in his mind. The corporal ran 20 yards in the open. The machine gun swung. Mud jumped behind him, then beside him, Then he disappeared. The captain beside Patton said, "They got him." Patton did not answer. Because the man had not fallen. He had dropped into something, a crease in the field, a place the maps had not bothered to draw. Patton raised the binoculars again. The corporal was still moving, low, fast, angled, not toward the window, toward the wall the window could not see. The radio operator whispered, "Should we cover him?" Patton said, "If you fire now, you tell that gun exactly where to look." So the ridge stayed silent. The mortars stayed silent. The officers stayed silent. Even the men in the field stopped trying to shoot. For a few seconds, the whole fight narrowed to one thing, a moving line in the mud. The Germans found him once. A burst cut through the beet leaves so close that Egan felt the air slap his cheek. His helmet went sideways. He kept running. He did not look back. He did not lift his head. He followed the low seam as if it were a rail in the ground. 40 yards, 100, 200. The barn grew larger. The machine gun lost him again. Then the seam ended. There were 12 yards of bare ground between the drainage cut and the stone wall. 12 yards with no trick left, no fold, no dip, no time. Egan came out of the ditch already running. A German rifle cracked from somewhere inside the barn. Stone chips jumped from the wall. Egan hit the blind side of the building shoulder first and dropped hard against it. For 1 second, nothing moved. On the ridge, Patton lowered his binoculars, not because the moment was over, because at that distance there was nothing left to see, only to wait for. The machine gun fired one last broken burst. Then it stopped. No one advanced at first. That was the strange part. The silence had been so sudden that the men in the beet field did not trust it. Then a door slammed open on the far side of the barn. Egan came out alone. His left sleeve was torn black with blood. His face was gray with mud. In his right hand he carried the German gunner's ammunition belt, dragging it behind him like a dead snake. That was when Patton picked up the radio. "Move the platoon," he paused. "Now." The line rose from the beet field. Men who had been nailed to the ground 5 minutes earlier began crossing it. The lieutenant was pulled back. The sergeant was carried. The road beyond the dairy barn opened, and the advance, which had stopped for one machine gun in one stone building, started moving again. Patton reached the barn 12 minutes later. The courtyard smelled of wet hay, burnt powder, and crushed apples from the orchard beyond the wall. Egan was sitting with his back against a water trough while a medic cut his sleeve away. When he saw the general, he tried to stand. Patton snapped, "Stay down." Egan froze. Patton walked to him, boots grinding in the gravel. For a moment, he said nothing. He looked past Egan at the beet field, at the drainage cut, at the shallow line that had been sitting there in plain sight while a whole platoon lay pinned under fire. Then he looked back. "Why did you go?" Egan swallowed. "Because the field dropped, sir." Patton waited. Egan pointed with his good hand. "Right there. The gun could rake the top of it, but it couldn't reach low enough if I stayed in the cut." He looked embarrassed, as if explaining it made it smaller. "I thought if I waited, somebody else would see it too. But the lieutenant was hit, and the longer we waited, the more men we'd lose." The medic tightened the bandage. Egan flinched but kept talking. So I went while the gun was still looking where we had been. Patton studied him. Did anyone order you? No, sir. Did anyone know what you were doing? No, sir. Did you know it would work? Egan looked across the field. No, sir. That answer changed Patton's face. Not much, just enough that the men around him noticed. Because Patton had heard every kind of battlefield boast. He had heard men dress panic up as courage and luck up as genius. But this was not boasting. This was a man telling the plainest version of the truth. He had seen lower ground. He had trusted it before anyone else could. Patton stood up. He took one step away. Then he turned back. Courage is not always the charge. Egan looked up. Patton pointed toward the field. Sometimes courage is noticing the ground before the noise convinces you there is no way through. No one wrote that down at the time, not officially. The official language came later. It said Corporal Egan had advanced under direct enemy fire, neutralized a hostile automatic weapon, and enabled the forward movement of his unit. Clean words. Army words. Words that made it sound as if the important thing had been the running. Patton did not think so. That night, in a schoolhouse being used as a temporary command post, he asked for Egan's name again. He wrote it on the back of a field report. Matthew Egan, Wheeling, 5th Division. Then he added a note in his own hand. This was not recklessness. The man read terrain under fire and acted before higher command could see what he saw. He did not defeat the gun by strength. He defeated it by observation, speed, and nerve. He stopped there for a moment. Then he wrote one more line. The difference between a killing field and a road was one soldier who could see the ground. The recommendation went forward with that note attached. Men argued over the language. Officers reduced it. Clerks cleaned it. Someone changed read terrain to displayed initiative, because clerks have a talent for making blood sound administrative. But Patton's note stayed with the file. And months later, when the division assembled in Germany, Egan was called out in front of men who had known him only as a quiet corporal with a stiff left arm. He hated every second of it. He stood too straight, his jaw locked, his eyes kept drifting toward the ground. When the medal was pinned to his uniform, he did not smile. Patton was there, older looking than he had been in Lorraine, harder around the eyes. But when he stepped in front of Egan, he did something that silenced the men closest to them. He saluted first. A general saluting a corporal. Not for rank, not for ceremony, for the thing he had seen in that beat field. Then Patton said, quietly enough that only the front row heard it, "You found the road before the rest of us knew there was one." Egan gave the salute back with his wounded arm, because he forgot it was the bad one. Pain crossed his face. Patton saw it, and for half a second the general almost smiled. After the war, Matthew Egan went home to Wheeling. He returned to the rail yard with a shoulder that ached in cold weather and a left arm that never lifted quite right. The yardmen knew he had been decorated. They did not know why. He never told the story. Not at lunch, not at the Union Hall, not to the boys who followed him around asking what France had been like. When a young switchman panicked over a jammed line of cars, Egan would stand beside him and look at the tracks. Just look. He would let the noise pass first, the whistles, the shouting, the foreman's anger. Then he would point to the one switch nobody had checked, or the one grade everyone had ignored. And he would say, "The ground tells you before the men do." Nobody knew what he meant. They just knew he was usually right. His wife knew more than most. She knew he kept the medal in a cigar box under winter gloves. She knew he never took it out. But Patton's note was different. That stayed in the top drawer of his desk, folded into thirds, soft at the creases from being opened too many times. When Egan died in 1982, his daughter found it there. Not framed, not displayed. Just kept. She read the line again and again. The difference between a killing field and a road was one soldier who could see the ground. When she asked her mother why he had hidden the medal but kept the note, her mother said, "Because he never thought the medal understood him." Then she touched the paper, but he thought that note did. For the rest of his life, Matthew Egan never described himself as brave. He said bravery was what people called it afterward, when they were safe enough to make the story simple. What happened in Lorraine was not simple to him. He had been afraid. He had expected to die. He had run anyway, not because he stopped being afraid, and not because he wanted anyone to remember his name. He ran because the field was telling him something. And in war, sometimes the whole difference between death and movement is one man who can still see what the noise is trying to hide. Everyone else saw a killing field. Egan saw the ground, and then he trusted it.